Okay, good morning. So we're starting a new simon Kuf Ayin Vov, a short simon, only one sif. Shapas Paites HaPaperes. So what we're going to be talking about is that you make a brach on bread, and that includes other things. And the truth is, the next simon will be more details about that. That's what we referred to previously. That Dvarim Haboim B'Toich Suda, things that you make a brach on bread, that covers all things in the Suda, most things in the Suda. So that's the next simon. But what we're discussing now is a slightly different halach. We'll see. Beirach ala pas, if a person makes a brach on bread, poite es ha-parperes. That exempts the bracha needed for parperes. What is that? Dahainu pirure pas. It's like crumbs of bread, dak, very small. Shedibkom im morok oidvash. You sort of stick them together with some liquid, with soup, or dvash, or with honey. We'll see the details in the Mishnah in a second. Beirach ala parperes. Conversely, if you make a bracha on the parperes, which the Mishnah says is a mezonos, lo potzar es hapas. That does not exempt the bracha needed on bread. Says the Ramah, beirach ala parperes, poita ma'aseh kedera. If you make a bracha on this parperes, this sort of these crumbs, that is a mezonos, so therefore that will exempt ma'aseh kedera, which is like a pasta, mezonos, things like that. She'udaisa v'chiyetze by porridge, oatmeal. V'chein in berach la ma'aseh kedera, and so too, if you make a bracha ma'aseh kedera, poites hapaperes, that exempts because it's the same bracha of mezonos. Okay, let's see. Dak. She'ein bohem kazayis. So if a person makes a bracha on bread, that exempts parperes. What is parperes? The Mechaber said it's sort of crumbs of bread which are very thin. Shedip came in moroko dvash, and you sort of glue them together with soup, with a liquid, or with honey. Says the Mishabura, she'ein bohem kazayis. They haven't got a kazayis for gam. Ovad mehem toya lechem. They've lost all semblance of bread. Shebirchos berim mezonos. And therefore their bracha is berim ne'mezonos. K'muvur b'simen kuf samaches sif yud. Mikol makom potzeluhu pas. Nevertheless, pas exempts the bracha on these things. Shem tefeilim legabe, because they're considered toffel to the bread. V'hareihem nechshavim k'maisa kedera to pas potarton, and they're considered like a regular sort of food mezonos that bread the bracha on bread will exempt the bracha for them. Beirach ala parperes, if it's the other way around, a guy made a bracha on these mezonos things, the derech hu lahavim koidem hasuda latanug lahamshich halev laachila. Because the way it was in those days is that you would have a few of these food items, these parperes, before the meal, either just because it's very geshmak to have a few of these crumb cakes, whatever you want to call them, either for tanug, they're just enjoyable, or to just stimulate an appetite. And that does not exempt the bracha on pas given the birchos and berim mezonos, because these things, these parperes, are considered mezonos. For Kosof B'shitza Mekubet says, Sha'af im kivim b'feirish lifter lo mahani. Even if you explicitly say, well, I'll make a bracha on this and that will exempt the bread, that does not help. Now this is very interesting. If you have some of these items before the meal, do you need to make a bracha achrona on it? If you only make the bracha letanug, so you're only eating them, in order to just enjoy them, or because to give you a little bit of satiation, you actually need to make a separate bracha before the meal. If, however, you didn't get around to it, and then you washed, and then you had hamichya, and then you're going to bench, but the birchas hamazon poita common in mezonos. But the birchas hamazon, the benching, will pata the after bracha needed for the mezonos. Commission custom the common siman reish ches if you zayv Mishnah Berurah, like we're going to get to Mr. Hashem. V'ayin sham v'yesh oimrim de'imdai telechol min mezonos gam b'toich hasuda, that if you intended to have some sort of mezonos during the meal, nechsheves lachila achas, then actually what you're eating just before the meal is considered one eating. And therefore lechatchila you can include the bracha achrona, you can include this in the birchas hamazon, and that will cover it. You should have in mind when you bench that this is going to cover not only what you ate during the meal, but also what you ate before the meal. Okay. Now this is very interesting. This is an interesting topic. Very common. Shabbos morning, you have Kiddush. Yeah, you get home from shul and you have some cake, you have some herring or whatever you have, and then you go into your Suda. So do you have to make a bracha achrona on the Kiddush that you have before you wash and have your meal? This is quite a familiar problem. So we have some cake for kichlach, and you have some crackers or whatever for chedayme. Nochem yesa she'af l'dei rishona lo yevarich aleihem bracha achrona kodim hasuda. According to the first opinion, you should not make a bracha achrona ele yiftarenu bebrichas hamazon, but rather the brichas hamazon you're going to make after lunch will cover it. For kol shkenim eichel hamin kisnin gam b'toich hasuda, and certainly if you're going to have some of these mezonos items during the meal, or birchas berminim mezonos shemevarich kodim hasuda paita gam osom, and the bracha of berminim mezonos will cover this. And if they're not covered by the hamotzi, they will cover them when you eat them during the meal. So lekula alma niftarin hakol b'brichas hamazon. According to that, everyone would agree if you're going to eat these things during the meal, that birchas hamazon will cover it mipnei dechol zeh shayach lesuda, because at the end of the day it's all connected to the meal, and therefore the benching will cover it. Now take a look at note number 5. Ubeshabbos shemaviyim la'achar kiddush minei metzika v'shar dvarim. You have kiddush. And within a short while after having kiddush, you're going to wash and have bread and have your suda. You don't need to make a bracha achrona. Very good. So Shabbos morning, you come home from shul and you make kiddush and you have some cake and some kichels and some crackers. Says the Orach HaShulchan, if you're going to eat a short while later, then you don't need to make a bracha achrona. This is considered a part of the meal, and you don't need a bracha achrona. However, he says, he quoted the Shatzin, he brings the Magen Avram, who says, on eating after Kiddush, mashma shaloi sovakein. But Lamaisa, I think that's what the Olam do. But the difficulty is, he says, teich zman kotza, within a short while you're going to. Now, what is zman kotza? That's a bit of a grey area. I haven't got any clarity really what that is. I remember once asking Rabbi Shmuel years ago, decades ago, what a zman kotza is, and it's hard to define. But if you're sitting, you're there. There are people coming in. There's Kiddush is at a short while, 10, 15 minutes before the meal, and it's at the same setting, and then you're going into wash. Then l'chora not. If it's a longer period of time, I don't know exactly, half an hour, and you're going to learn a bit or talk or go for a walk, whatever, then of course that would be different. But you get the issues. Okay. What? Well, we'll see soon. I'm not sure if we're going to mention this footnote, but he actually says exactly that point and says on the contrary. He says, and it's not good enough to try and fulfill your quota of me'er brachas at the expense of a bracha she'ein tzricha. So it doesn't work. Okay. Now, then continuing the Mishnah Berurah, we're at the last skinny line of the Mishnah Berurah. Va'agav, and says the Mishnah Berurah, says the Chavetz Chaim, just by the way, I'm going to just mention a few other halachas that are related to this topic. Till now, we've been talking about when you're having mezonos before the meal. What about other foods? For example, we know that if you have fruit during the meal, you have to make a bracha on the fruit during the meal. So what if you eat them just before the meal? Could go in peiros, like fruit. So you're going to have a bit of fruit before the meal, and you're going to have some fruit during the meal. And the bracha, let's say you have some nectarine and some oranges or something before the meal, so you make a ber pro-eitz, and that will cover the ber pro-eitz that you're going to have on these oranges or these fruits during the meal. So therefore, the eating prior to the meal is considered the tzorech of the suda, and therefore you don't need to make a bracha after them. So you don't need to make a ber nefashos for you to have some fruit before the meal, and then to continue to have some of this fruit during the meal. You will not need to make a bracha achrona on what you ate during the meal, before the meal. The birchas hamazon yiftach kol kameshim hapateres masha eichel b'teicha suda, because the birchas hamazon will cover what you ate of the fruit, just like it would cover whatever you ate during the meal. V'im lo yochel peres b'teicha suda. If, however, you don't have any fruit during the meal, tzarich levarich bracha achrona alehem, then you would have to make a bracha achrona. To kiven she'achal and kodim asuda, but because you ate them before the meal, ein shayach in the suda klal. You're not planning on having any of these fruit during the meal, therefore it's not shaykh to the suda at all. Va'afilim lo berich bracha achrona kodim l'tishadayim, tzarich levarich b'teich asuda. Isn't that amazing? So you have some some apples or something before the meal. This is just because you fancy it. It's not connected to the suda at all. If you didn't, you've got to make a bracha achrona before the meal, and if you didn't, during a meal you've washed and you're going to bench later, you would have to make a bracha achrona during the meal.
Which fruit are you talking about?
You start before the meal.
No,
we're talking about some fruit you have before before you've washed and benched. Before you've washed
the fruit that you have during the meal.
Yeah, so the fruit during the meal that's considered the tzorech of the suda. That's considered part of the meal, and then you would that would be covered by Birchas Hamazon.
Not the fruit you have before benching.
Yeah, but right now he's talking about the correct.
Because there you do make.
That there Birchas Hamazon covers it. You make a bracha beforehand. Correct. So again, if let's say you're in the middle of a meal, and for dessert or at the end you want to have some fruit, so then you make a bracha, but you don't make a bracha achrona. That Birchas Hamazon covers it, but the bracha rishona you do make. Correct. Here we're talking about where you're having fruit before the meal. So for sure you make a bracha rishona. The shaila is, do you make a separate bracha achrona of brei nefashos or alo eitz or whatever you've had before the meal? So if you have it, he says, you are going to have more of the fruit during the meal, then your Birchas Hamazon will cover it. If, however, you're not going to have any of it during the meal, then you need to make a bracha achrona. And not only that, if you forgot to make a bracha achrona, you need to make a separate bracha achrona during the course of your meal. That's amazing. Okay. Kol zeh k'sheichel peres. We're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines from the bottom. Kol zeh k'sheichel peres. All until now we're talking about when you eat fruit. V'chanal. If you eat something which wouldn't need a bracha like during the meal, kagoin mine lifton or periadoma shekorin erdepel or blubus, right, which is potatoes. He says at the bottom. So, for example, you wash. You're not going to make a separate bracha on potatoes during the meal. That's the mainstay of your meal. Im kain afidim daitlechol mehem gam b'teich hasuda ein moya lohem bracha rishayna. If you have some potatoes or meat or something before, then ein moya, he says, bracha haklal bracha rishayna. Belav hochi hem niftarim al yedei birchas hamoitzi. Val kain masha eichel kodim hasuda ein shaykh klal hasuda. And therefore, really, what you're eating before the meal is not really is considered connected to the meal. But tzarich levarich aleim bracha achrona brei nefashos rabbos. You need to make a separate bracha. So if you want to nash a few potatoes before the suda, he says this is you would have to make a bracha rishona and a bracha achrona brei nefashos. Ulinin yain v'sham mashkim. What about drinks? Mavur b'siman kuf ein dalet sif voven zayin. That Mr. will get there. That was already explained in Kuf Ayin Dalet. But if you eat things before the meal in order to stimulate an appetite, and to open the stomach, some sort of whatever it is, some sort of drink, not drink, some sort of appetizer, or some sort of salty food, that doesn't, because and that's the general rule. If anything is shaykh to the suda, then Birchas Hamazon will cover it. So if you have an appetizer beforehand, in order to open up the appetite, then you would not need to make a bracha achrona. That which it's allowed to eat before hamoitzi, dvarim she'ein tzarich bracha b'teich hasuda, things which do not require a separate bracha in the meal, it's only if you're not going to eat straight away. But if the table is laid, here's your point. If you're but you're about to wash, then don't nash just 2 seconds before you're about to wash, because that's a bracha she'ein tzricha. Just wash, make hamoitzi, and then these things you're going to eat, that will be included in hamoitzi. And yivarech hamoitzi ala lechem, v'yifta shadvarim, make a hamoitzi, and that will cover the things that you're going to eat. V'yesh omrim, however, that if a person likes, he wants it now. He likes nushing before the meal, right? Then he prefers to eat it now than during the meal. It's not considered a bracha she'ein tzricha. If there are things which create an appetite, you can certainly do that. Let's just very quickly, just one number 10, sorry, footnote number 10, it just says the very important point. He says, he's quoting the Shatzian, he says over there, that's what we were talking about before. The minhag ha'olam is you have some mezonos after Kiddush before you go and wash for the meal. You're going to tell me that it's going to despoil your appetite, because during the meal you should have a hearty appetite for a Shabbos Suda. So if you have a big Kiddush beforehand, it's going to ruin your appetite. Because you're about to have your lunch. So you've got two problems. A, it's going to ruin your appetite, and you shouldn't eat Shabbos with a te'ovein. And B, it's a bracha she'ein tzricha. He says, minhag Yisrael is Kaddish, and we can be miyashav the minhag. Don't protest against those who have mezonos or whatever before the meal. They're machmir. What they do is they make Kiddush, and then they wash netilas yadayim, they make moitzi, and then whatever they eat, crackers, herring, cake, whatever it may be, that's part of their meal. But still, don't go to a Kiddush and fill yourself up and take away your appetite for the Suda Shabbos. Here's your point, Eli. You want to make a bracha to get up to 100 brachas. Don't get yourself into a chashash of a bracha she'ein tzricha, even if your rationale is to try and get your mea brachas. Okay, Peseda, we'll leave it there.
There's no mention about how much. Like by the Seder, you say by karpas not to have a kazayis in order not to make the bracha achrona.
Yeah, because you're going to have later.
Yes.
Yeah. So he doesn't say correct. He doesn't say how much, but for the bracha rishona, it's even a small amount, and for bracha achrona, it's got to be a share, whatever the bracha achrona is. If it's less than a share of bracha achrona, there's nothing to talk about.
You would have a kazayis karpas.
If you have it, so then so Prasavi bracha is the hakal. We don't do it, but avoid putting yourself in that situation. Yeah.